Alabi Sama. That voice is on State Affairs. He is telling the story of the Dimka coup. But Babangida must be given the benefit of doubt. He says, the first thing I did was to get in touch with my troops stationed at the Ikeja cantonment. But I also knew I had to be careful with so much uncertainty in the air, since I wasn't sure where they stood regarding their loyalty. Babangida continues, after I failed to establish contact with any of my most trusted lieutenants by telephone, I quickly hopped on a motorcycle ridden by a young corporal whose name I forget now. On our way to Ikeja, I stopped at Lieutenant Colonel Hamzat Abdullah's residence, close to the Ikeja cantonment. Once I confirmed that it was safe to enter the cantonment, I borrowed Hamzat's car and entered the premises through a rear entrance. Once inside the cantonment, I established contact with Lieutenant Colonel Chris Ugokwe. With the assistance of Lieutenant Colonel Ugokwe and Joshua Dogoyaro, I mobilized loyal troops, weapons, and vehicles before heading back to the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, Radio House at Ikoyi. When we got to Radio House in an armored column, we noticed that Dimka's men surrounded the place, primarily young officers who were a part of the plot, including his ADC, Second Lieutenant Samuel Gaba. As I got down from my armored vehicle unarmed and approached the building, Babangida was unarmed. He didn't confront Dimka with an arm. I approached the building. Dimka's ADC, Gaba, attempted to stop me. By now, Dimka had spotted me from the story building and screamed, Ibrahim, I'm going to shoot you. I shouted back, well, that's okay. If you shoot me, you know my family. You will take care of them. They will become your responsibility. I have no problem. It will be nice to die in the hands of a friend. After a pause, Dimka soberly replied, Ibrahim, I like your guts. Come upstairs. Now this is the encounter between Ibrahim Babangida and his friend Dimka. You know, the military boys, they were all friends. They were all friends. As I gingerly took my steps towards the stairs, a visibly fretful Ugokwe pleaded with me to be very careful. I waved Chris away, reminding him that Buka Dimka and I had come a long way. Besides, being a trained officer, I was confident that Dimka would not shoot an unarmed colleague. And Dimka was indeed a close friend, one of the groomsmen at my wedding to Miriam in Kaduna in 1969. A 1963 Australian Army Cadet School graduate in Portsea, Australia, Dimka was one of the first Nigerian Army officers to be trained in faraway Australia. Although he had risen to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Physical Training Corps of the Army, he lived on the edge and earned himself a crappy reputation for womanizing and heavy drinking. You know, in that interview, when Alabi Sama told me that Dimka forgot his camera in the car, you know, the next question was he drunk? Because the story about Dimka was that he loved alcohol. And now Babangida is saying he has a reputation for womanizing. When I got upstairs, Babangida continues, I could tell from his breath that he had had a lot to drink. The stench of alcohol from around him and his boys was pungent. Chris Ugokwe was right after all. I needed to be careful because the atmosphere was so charged that any wrong move could lead to the loss of lives. To keep Dimka at ease, I opened the conversation. So the point is that Babangida decided to negotiate with Dimka because by this time, Dimka was already holed up in the MBC building, Nigeria Broadcasting Corporation building, now known as Radio Nigeria. That is FROCN. So he was in that building because in that building, he announced that he had taken over the leadership of the country. And by this time, there were workers in that building. Even the head of the corporation was in that building. But Babangida in his story said he wanted to avoid casualty. The reason he didn't approach Dimka with a gun, he wanted Dimka to drop his arms. And in that negotiation, Dimka refused to drop his arms. And Babangida left him and said, I will be back. By the time Babangida came back with his men, this time to confront him, Dimka had escaped from the building. That is why the stories of these men should be read. Not just read, their stories should be taught. We have to pay attention to history. Why were the Dimkas angry? You know, Yakubu Gowon is a Plateau man from Plateau. The Middle Belt controlled Nigeria army for a long time. In fact, it was the Middle Belt that was the key to Nigeria winning the war against Biafra. Gowon was from Plateau, and he had governed from 1966 to 1975. That is 9 years. And Murtala Muhammad and the young officers carried out that coup, the counter coup that consumed the life of General Aguiyi Ironsi and Colonel Faji. Danjuma was in Ibadan to carry out his own aspect of the coup against Ironsi. So these men had consolidated the act of coup plotting. You will hear from Tola Adini that the 1966 counter coup was mainly the work of Murtala Muhammad. They only invited Gowon to take over. That is one side of the story. And by 1975, they felt that Gowon was not doing well. The same group of officers, after fighting the war, decided to carry out a coup against Gowon. Babangida was part of that plot. Murtala Muhammad was the leader of the plot, and he became the head of state. Buka Dimka was from Plateau State. By the time Murtala took over, the Plateau guys were no longer enjoying the attention they got from Gowon. They became angry. They felt they had been sidelined by the new regime of Murtala Muhammad. Obasanjo was the number 2 man under Murtala Muhammad. Obasanjo was the chief of staff, Supreme Headquarters. He was the number 2 to Murtala Muhammad. Dimka decided to take Murtala Muhammad out. That morning, the morning of the 13th of February, 1976, was a bloody morning. Dimka was ready. It was launched on that day with coordinated attacks. Murtala Muhammad was ambushed in his car, a black Mercedes-Benz, in Lagos traffic near the Federal Secretariat at Ikoyi. He was shot multiple times by soldiers led by Dimka, and Murtala Muhammad, the head of state, died on the spot. You know, the death of Murtala Muhammad that day changed the security architecture around Nigeria's heads of state. You know, Murtala was so free. He wasn't even going home with his brigade of guards. He didn't have men on siren. He wanted to be that simple head of state that you could reach. So he went about easily, without fear, not knowing that Dimka was lurking around. If you read this book, Not My Will, in this book, Obasanjo said he complained to Murtala Muhammad, why is this lapse in your security? Murtala wasn't concerned. So Dimka got him with ease and took him out. Murtala hadn't spent 1 year yet in power when Dimka took him out. He was shot multiple times. His aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Akintunde, was also killed while trying to protect Murtala Muhammad. It is the story of time. It is the class of history, politics, and power.